Our friend Bo invited us to attend an underground rave during Halloween. Knowing how we were with parties, we already expected that it would be a wild night. All hyped and optimistic, we followed his lead without asking much about the details. We boarded the plane in the morning and arrived in the afternoon, and then we traveled by land until dark. We went to an isolated part of the countryside which looked like the ruins of a former plantation. There was a relatively long line outside of an abandoned building that was sealed shut with a metal door, and 4 intimidating bouncers were guarding the entrance. It seemed that the security was unnecessarily tight, and there were requirements in order to attend this underground party. Lucky for us, or perhaps unlucky, Bo pulled some strings and used his foreign connections in order to slip us in. Little did we know, this heavily guarded rave was far more than what we bargained for. The inside of the abandoned building was repurposed into a large function room with bars of different drinks in every corner. They had the strongest alcohol that the world could offer, and I couldn't even identify more than half of them. There were countless bottles of the strongest Polish vodka, and there were bizarre concoctions of moonshines with varied distillations. There were bottles with reptiles and arachnids in them. It was easy to say that these drinks were not for the faint of heart. Dance poles were mounted in collapsed stone carved columns, and the neon lights were installed in solid walls. The entire illumination of this large space was actively strobing with the heavy rhythm of acid trap and gothic techno that an individual with epileptic disorder would probably die there. It was dark and chaotic, which perfectly fit the theme of the Halloween. There were even 3D projections of ghosts all over the area. It was spooky, disturbing, and all our senses were in hyperdrive. We were all extensively exhilarated just by being there. Each element was sending an enigmatic buzz through our spines that we all felt so exhausted yet so blessed to experience this underground event. Bo persistently reminded us to bring the best Halloween costumes that we could get our hands on. We thought that pushing that much stress on what we should wear in a rave party was exaggerated. When we saw his prosthetics and extensive amount of makeup, we thought that it was an overkill. However, we were glad and thankful that he basically forced us to do the same, or we would have been underdressed for the event. The costumes of the attendants could easily compete with the Hollywood costumes, if not better. Those who attended as devils looked like biblical demons with authentic animal horns and heavy prosthetics. The zombies looked like they were actually rotting with moving worms and all-body makeup. Each of their costumes looked incredibly realistic, obviously expensive, and very time-consuming to prepare. Along with the influence of the strobe lights and very intoxicating drinks, I often had to look twice when someone passed in my line of sight as I thought that I was already seeing things. They were genuinely terrifying to say the least. We couldn't contain our enthusiasm and eventually danced along with the aggressive beats of the blaring music, but Bo told us to leave some energy for later. As if what we were experiencing was not overwhelming already, Bo said that we would enter the VIP area where the real crazy things happen. At that point, I could no longer imagine what else could top the things around us. He then led us to an iron hatch which was also guarded by even bigger bouncers full of body modifications and demonic tattoos, and my mind was completely blown when we entered the underground lounge. There were 2 people in the lounge area with stains in their costumes that looked like blood, and they were practically buzzed out of their wits since they couldn't even open their eyes while having a hideous grin on their faces. An eerie atmosphere enveloped the area, and another intimidating bouncer was blocking the hallway. We were required to show our passport before we could go further, and we were given an extensive amount of warning while he was scanning them. We were told that beyond the hall would be an authentic experience of macabre and gore. To be honest, I was already too drunk to think straight and just went along with the flow of things. I could already tell that it would be much darker and sinister than what was happening on the upper floor because of the warnings, but I didn't take the words of the bouncer too literally. Aside from the level of toxicity that our bodies could take without dying, the only element in this event that could get any further was the experience itself. The red-lit hallway which led to the underground function room was both fancy and disturbing. There were preserved bodies of disfigured animals displayed on the walls. When we reached the end, we were immediately greeted by a waft of smoke with a strong smell which put us all in a hazy, euphoric state. I was already doubting the things that I was seeing, and it just got much worse at that point. The music in the lower floor was overlapping beats with indiscernible singing. They were not meant to dance along with. They were playing to mess our heads up even further and jumble our senses. Instead of bars, the area looked more like a gallery of sort. The light was much dimmer yet consistent, and it was so we could see what we were about to have. People were crowding around different sections of the gallery that I didn't see what they were looking at until we squeezed ourselves through. We were handed a chalice as we waited for our turn. There was a decapitated head of a ram with 3 eye sockets hollowed out. I couldn't tell if it was real, but I knew that what was coming out of its mouth was real blood. Somehow, they were able to infuse alcohol into it, but the consistency and the subtle metallic taste of real blood was still very apparent when I drank it. Drinking real blood in a chalice was already pretty messed up, but so were we, and things were just about to get even worse from there. The next section of the gallery was some sort of art installation hidden under a red sheet, and propped right next to it was a portable smokeless grill. People were surrounding that thing under the sheet with forks and knives in their hands, and so I realized that we would be served some meat. However, there was no way that I could have imagined the kind of meat that we were about to have. The crowd was pretty rowdy and clearly very excited. I looked forward to it for a second since I loved meat, but I was taken aback when the server removed the cover. There was a naked man in his 30s tied on a cross with a gag in his mouth, and it took a second for me to process that something inhumanely disgusting was about to occur. The server began to sharpen his knife as the people cheered. Some of my friends who immediately backed away were stared at with a disdained glare. It got even more messed up when the server removed the gag from the tied man. Surprisingly, he was encouraging the crowd to have a taste of his flesh. I couldn't tell if he was drugged out of his mind. He screamed in pain that was mixed with a guttural laughter as the server began to take a slice off of his leg. He placed it on the grill and added some spices as if he was cooking a regular meat. When the first person in line took a bite and nodded his head, people started to dig in with their own knives and forks. They were eating him alive, and the man being eaten was enjoying it despite of the pain. Out of utter shock and disgust, I was forced to get back on my senses, which wasn't exactly a good thing for the next scene that I was about to see. We were already horrified beyond belief, but having our identities taken could only mean that we would be in deep trouble with whomever organized this event if ever we said anything to the authorities. The hallway was blocked by a huge bouncer that was already checking on us from afar, but I simply wasn't able to hold myself back for what I was about to see. On the third section of the gallery, there was a marble table with a grooved indent that surrounded the center plate filled with sushis and chunky slices of various meat. The only thing missing was a dip, and she just walked right past me. With a wide smile on her face, a lady bent forward and leaned her head above the table. Without an ounce of regret, she casually slit her throat. A server helped her stay in place as her blood flowed through the grooves, and people started dipping on it with their preferred choice of meat. I screamed at the top of my lungs, and my voice pierced through the hall. The bouncer immediately walked towards us while people were staring at me as if I was in the wrong. This underground event was far too much for any sane person to attend, and the people involved in it were insane and inhumane. We were warned, but we didn't take it seriously. However, who would have thought that it could go this far? We were escorted out of the premises, and we were held inside a room for roughly 3 hours. Bo talked to the event manager and practically begged to let us slide. We apologized for causing a commotion in the end, and we shouldn't have come. Along with bundles of papers that we had to sign and personal information that we were forced to provide, we were eventually let go with a promise that we wouldn't mention this Halloween rave to a single soul.